Hey everyone, my name is Mike Voigt. I currently pastor a Wesleyan church in the state of Connecticut, one of very few Wesleyan churches in the Northeast. This video is for our week one assignment for congregational relationships. And like you, I had to craft those three questions, and then I had to ascertain some responses from people who are closest to me. At least I chose people who are very close to me, who I would consider part of that inner circle, intimate friendship. Um, I interviewed friends. One, his name is Matt. One, his name is Mike. Ironically, both of them live in Michigan. That was where I first started off in my ministry, and they became very, very close friends that I deeply shared life with. And then I asked my wife these questions because my wife knows me very, very well, and she knows things. She knows what I'm thinking before I ever voice it, and so who better to ask than her? So I started. My first question was this. It says, based on my personality, passions, and interests, how do you think I can best continue to grow relationally as a pastor and a spiritual leader? I would say with all of the responses, my friends and my wife noted that I'm a very passionate individual when it comes to ministry, and I'm also one who loves education. Not necessarily doing all the homework, but I'm a learner at heart. And so all three of them identified that. And what was interesting was all three of them mentioned teaching a small group and investing in mentoring relationships. It appears as if all three believe that I would continue to grow and thrive if I had those types of contexts and I was involved in those types of contexts with people who are actively wanting to go deeper, think deeper, and become disciples of Jesus on an even deeper level. My wife noted she believes that I should further my education even after the seminary experience, whether it would be continuing with education in the academic setting or attending conferences and seminars that inspire me. She is very aware, as are my two other friends, that I just love to learn, and they believe that that is how I would best grow relationally as a pastor and a spiritual leader. The second question I asked was, knowing my shortcomings and insecurities, what are some potential obstacles that may prevent or stunt my growth relationally as a pastor and a spiritual leader? And what's ironic is that my wife and my two friends, it's interesting just to see their responses because they all were dead on and they all seem to express the same thing. And openly admit, I will openly admit that I can be an insecure individual. I would say for the longest time, I have felt like I've had to prove myself. And over again, I've had to check myself at certain points, realizing that I don't have to prove myself. I mean, there's just something inside of me that just constantly drives me. And even all my wife and my two friends have told me, Mike, you are your harshest critic. And so that is something that I have been constantly trying to grow through. But I know that that shortcoming and that insecurity can sometimes come out in me as a pastor and as I engage with people. And so I am constantly having to check myself with that. And I'm not going to sit here and say I haven't brought that out at just inopportune times. So they also mentioned that I tend to take on things and fully shoulder them. I'm a guy who wears his heart on his sleeve, and I naturally gravitate towards those who are hurting, who are in need, and I have a tough time. And I even wrote this in my first post, discussion post one, that I have a tough time saying no. That I can't do that at the moment, that I can't address that at the moment. I have a tough time thinking that I can't just encourage someone or be with someone and help them. And so sometimes I can take on the weight. This is one of my friends said, I could take on the weight of all that, and oftentimes I'm neglecting the fact that that it's God who is up to ministry and He's already doing His work in and through His church, and that I don't have to bear this by myself, if that makes sense. My wife noted this, and this is something that only my wife mentioned. She says, Mike, you tend to take things very personally when a comment or a criticism is made, and I would agree. You know, it's one of those things where oftentimes that insecurity that's just kind of sitting there, where I feel like I have to prove myself. I feel like I'm not good enough or smart enough, where I'm kind of being my harshest critic. You know, when I'm at a tired, worn out space, if someone makes a comment or they make a critique or they criticize me, instead of stepping back and just kind of reflecting on that comment or that criticism and where that came from and what was the motive behind that from that person, I tend to take that very personal, and it's tough for me to move past that. And that is something that I've talked a lot about with my wife, and it's something that I'm still kind of processing and working through. But anyway, it's just very interesting to see my two friends and my wife just kind of all their responses to these first two questions are very, very similar. So they seem to know me very, very well. The third question that I asked them was, in your opinion, how well do I relate with others as a pastor and a spiritual leader? Um, and then I asked the second question, in what ways have I not related well? So they identified the ways I relate well with others. They've said, Mike, you're transparent, you're a real guy, you're authentic, what you see is what you get. Those are very gracious words. And they even mentioned, Mike, you speak grace and mercy into people's lives, and you do it well, and you let people know how much they're loved. And then my wife made a comment. She said, Mike, you tend to gravitate towards new believers and those who may have been or are on the fringes, on the outside looking in, wondering if they could ever be a part of the Jesus movement, the church. She says, you relate well that way with the newer folks and the ones on the fringe. But then she said, and this answers that second question of how have I not related well. She says, you seem unsure of how to relate with longtime believers. She didn't say I did it poorly or I did it bad. She just said you tend to give more attention and more energy to those who are on the fringes. And she even mentioned maybe that's because that was your story. That is your story. That was what happened when you were coming back to the faith as a young man in your 20s. And then my friends also mentioned ways I've not related well. They said, Mike, when you doubt yourself or you feel worn out, we notice that because you wear your heart on your sleeve. And what often we have noticed, Mike, is you tend to pull away from people during seasons like that. You tend to kind of pull away and you shield yourself, and you don't let others speak into your life the way that you have spoken into their lives. One of them also mentioned that when I engage with people who are quote unquote just seem to be doing the church thing, or leaders who are just kind of, they're just kind of going with the flow. They said, the passionate part of you is great. We love that about you. But one thing about that passion is that it can often go the other way and be a bad thing, where you kind of grow some resentment against those who are in this apathetic space. And I would agree. I would agree. After interviewing the three of these individuals, I would say that they are dead on with some things. I really appreciated their insights, and as far as affirming the things that I do well and how I relate well, and then I'm also intrigued by the way they have also been able to identify my insecurities to a T. And I think that just goes to show that these three are definitely part of the inner circle, and they're people that they know me inside and out. They see the heart. They know my passion, and so I've just really appreciated their insights. So hopefully this gives you a snapshot of Mike and the way Mike relates well with people as a pastor and a spiritual leader, the way that he can continue to grow, and the way that I struggle. And hopefully this gives you enough to kind of process and work through. So thanks for your time, and thanks for tuning in.